Okay, I confirmed you can hear me. Sorry. All right, so we were talking about imagery. So the concrete appeals to the senses. The textbook gives us an example of an egg yolk, a cement block, a field of lavender, right? These are specific things and they're sensory things. An egg yolk, right? That is such, the color. We know what it looks, how it spreads. We know what yolk tastes like. A cement block, right? We know that we can insinuate the weight of it, the roughness of it, the size of it. Abstractions, on the other hand, are things like loneliness, grief, beauty, right? These are abstract concepts, not concrete concepts. Judgments are also closely tethered to abstractions. For example, good and bad are judgments, and they're also really abstract because they don't tell us anything specific. If we're like, oh, the movie was great, the poem was good, what does that even mean? What is it? Why, first of all, but also what is good to me is not going to be necessarily good to someone else. The night, it was really scary, right? A scary night. It's a judgment. It's not specific. Judgments assume your reader is in your head and knows what is scary to you, right? These are abstract judgments that really vary between people, and that's not helpful for your reader. So imagery appeals to the senses, and in your poetry, your images should be concrete and specific. And strong imagery is concrete and specific. Okay, let's talk about metaphors. So, to offer another definition, a metaphor is a direct comparison between two unlike things in order to present deeper insight, right? So the part of that definition that you should really have in mind is a direct comparison between two unlike things, or a comparison between two unlike things suffices. It is important that the things of the metaphor, which the textbook tells us are the vehicle and the tenor, which I'm not going to go into breaking down vehicle and tenor because it just gets a little complicated, and we don't need to go there in this class. But the things of the metaphor, the vehicle and the tenor, right? The metaphor has two parts. They should be unlike. That is how we ask our reader to do work. That's how we ask our reader to interact with and experience the poem. Additionally, that's how we make deeper meanings. Okay, for example, she is such a sunny person, right? That's a metaphor. The person isn't actually being called like a star at the center of the universe. She's being described as like kind of bright and warm, right? Or Jackie is a tornado. Jackie's being described as a tornado in order to make a point about her like messy personality, perhaps, and demeanor. These are relatively cliche metaphors, but they are unlike things, right? A person is not a sun. A person is not a tornado. But if I were to say that Jackie is as wild as a horse on fire, we can see how wild that is, right? Or Jackie is a wild horse on fire, right? We're talking about metaphors, not similes. Jackie is a wild horse on fire. We can see that wildness. Additionally, we have the connotations of that image. It does more work than calling her a tornado, but it's kind of saying the same thing. And then we have the connotations of a horse on fire, suffering, this nature on nature, right? Fire and horse, kind of like nature destroying nature. Begs the question of why the horse is on fire. It's much more complex. So again, it's describing her in a similar way as the tornado metaphor, but in a much more interesting way, and in a way that allows us to create more meaning in our poem. So a metaphor comparison between two unlike things, and it does not use like or as. That's a simile. We'll talk about that in a minute. An extended metaphor is when a metaphor is carried through a poem's entirety, right? If I say Jackie is a wild horse on fire, and then I never talk about the concept of a wild horse on fire again. We never return to this metaphor of like going absolutely ballistic and suffering. We never go back there. That's an isolated metaphor. But if I were to continue with this concept of a horse on fire throughout the poem and spin it in different ways, I'm extending the metaphor. I might evolve it. A pop culture example, Katy Perry's song Firework, right? Baby, you're a firework. And then she goes into all these ways that you're a firework. That's an extended metaphor. The whole poem is an extended metaphor, or the whole song's an extended metaphor, with the metaphorical framework being comparing a lover and a love to a firework, or a dear person to a firework, right? And what fireworks do. Anders Carlson Wee's Dynamite is an extended metaphor. The entire poem is about the metaphor of dynamite, the implications of that metaphor, comparing things to dynamite, concrete things, but also relationships, childhood, some more abstract ideas as well. It is also important that we consider metaphoric unity in our poems, and the textbook touches on this briefly. A bunch of random metaphors does not help us make cohesive and unified meaning. So if you're like, oh, I'm excited about using metaphors and similes, same goes for similes, check through them. And, are they connected in any way? They should, make some associative leaps. Okay. So a metaphor is a direct comparison. If I say Jackie is a wild horse on fire, I'm not putting Jackie up against a wild horse on fire. I'm saying Jackie is a wild horse on fire. Okay? If I say Jackie is as wild as a horse on fire, I'm putting those things next to each other. Is as wild as a horse. She isn't, the thing. She is like the thing. So metaphors are a really heavy gesture in a poem. A simile offers a bit more distance between the things. So a simile is a comparison between two things using like or as, right? William Wordsworth says, I wandered lonely as a cloud, right? I thought I had more on simile. I guess that's all I have. A simile is like or as. Metaphor is saying the thing is another thing. Know that metaphors are a bit more powerful, perhaps. But similes allow us. Similes. I don't want to say when we use a simile we're like less invested, but we can move between similes, I think, more easily than we can drop in metaphors. And then, lastly, personification, which isn't a definition given in your textbook, but I want you to have. Personification is a figure of speech in which a non-human thing, an animal, an object, an idea, is given human characteristics. If we were to say, it's been raining here in Houston, right? The sky is weeping. It's personification. Or the Emily Dickinson poem I shared with you to show you the M dashes. Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me, right? Personifying death. So we have images, we have metaphors, we have similes. All these things are closely related and overlap. Recall that the image invokes the senses, sight, smell, touch, taste, and sound, and employs detail, specific and concrete detail and description. So an example of a specific image. The ocean of my childhood is cornflower blue. Hey, buddy. Right? We have a specific image. It's a descriptive image. It's a strong image. But there's no metaphor or simile here. An example of a metaphor or simile that employs imagery, which they often do, her hair, golden and fine, fluttered across her face when she ran.